Hey guys, welcome back, it's Whoopsies, and today we are going to be going over every single breakable wall in Dead by Daylight. Let's dive right in. Now, before we get too far into this video, I want to go over a handful of key assumptions that I think are going to be important to this video. And when we go into the maps and we look at this more in depth, I can reference these key assumptions and it'll make a lot more sense, right? So, first and foremost, the main reason you want to kick out breakable walls is to make loops shorter. If kicking out a breakable wall makes a loop longer, it's going to make your job a lot harder in order to get a quick hit on a survivor than if you make the loop shorter. And so by and large, the walls you want to kick out are the ones that shorten up loops. The second point, and this is kind of in the same vein, is if breaking out a breakable wall gives survivors more options, you don't want to break it out, but if breaking it out gives them less options, then you do want to kick it out. And what I mean by this, and going into my third assumption, is that if there's a window that's really strong, they can vault it, and then they have the option of like running to the next tile, or like vaulting back if you try to circle around. There's a number of things that the survivors can do, but if you kick out a breakable wall that's right next to a window, it eliminates the number of options they have once they use that window. Going off of that, a lot of times in maps you're going to see a window and a breakable wall like almost directly next to it, either directly to the right or directly to the left, doesn't really matter. By and large, you want to kick out those breakable walls because those windows are usually really strong, and by kicking out the breakable wall, it weakens both the window and the tile as a whole and gives the survivors less options, and it also increases the likelihood that you'll be able to hit them. And the last key point that I want to make before we get into this video is that there are some breakable walls that are just strong. You just know that they're strong, and if you have a sec and you spawn near them, you could kick these out from the beginning of the match. And so when you go into a match, if you see a breakable wall that you know is strong, you can just take a sec, kick it out, and it's going to help you out in the long run. So now that we've gotten those key assumptions out of the way, let's dive right into the maps, and we'll take a look at every single one of these palettes, and I'm going to go over how some of these assumptions apply in each case. Let's take a look. Alright, so we're going to start off with Coal Tower. This is the first of the Macmillan Estate maps that we're going to take a look at, and while we're here, I'm going to bring up a couple points that apply to the Macmillan maps in general, but also by and large to a lot of the maps in the game. Now, the first point is that for a lot of these maps, most of the breakable walls that we're going to be taking a look at are only going to be found in this main building right here, okay? So for Coal Tower, it's this big structure here. For Grave of Glenvale, it's the Saloon. But we're only really going to be finding breakable walls mostly in the main building. Now, specifically with this building, if you get this setup right here, sometimes this window is open and the breakable wall is still in the same spot. It might be shifted over a little bit to the left, but this is the other layout on the bottom. Now, with this bottom floor, going back to our key assumptions, right? We've got a window here and we've got a breakable wall directly to our left. So we're going to want to break out this wall 10 times out of 10 because we don't want the survivor to be able to hop over this window and get a bunch of distance. We want to be able to come out through this side, and even though there's a pallet right here, which they could run to, once that pallet's gone, then this area becomes a giant dead zone. And so once it becomes a dead zone, then they have nowhere to run. Now this other one on the bottom, we don't want to kick out. On this variation, the pallet spawned over between the car and like these big spools, but sometimes the pallet can spawn between these like tank treads, and it'll be right here. But either way, going back to our key assumptions again, we don't want to kick out this door because it gives the survivor more options. If they're being chased by you and you chase them around and they get in here, they really only have two places to go, right? They can go to this window or they can go upstairs. If you kick out this wall, you give them a third option and possibly even access to more pallets than they would have had access to if you hadn't kicked it out. So remember, this one on this side of the building looking out at the hill, always kick it out because it'll either be next to this window, which will be open, or this window, which will be open, and it'll make either of these windows significantly weaker than if the window wasn't there, or if the window was there and the breakable wall had not been kicked out. But conversely, we don't want to kick out this wall because it gives the survivors more options and access to more pallets, which will in turn make the loops longer. Now going up to this second floor, this back wall, again, we don't need to break this out, right? Because if we just break this out and take a look at it, you have one pallet down there, but other than that, this is a massive dead zone. So you don't need to kick this out because already you can chase the survivor at this side, and if they run over here, they have nowhere to go. So really, we're kind of trying to zone survivors where if they drop down here, they have to go to the left, because if they go this way to the right, they're just going to be running into a dead zone. Now if we go back up here and we look at this one, this breakable wall, this one is kind of it's a you choose. So remember, this one on the backside, don't break that one out. But this one, it's really up to you. If we look out of this window, right, that we've created now by breaking out the wall, we can see 2 tiles. So breaking out this breakable wall gives you a little bit more vision, and if there's survivors down below you, it gives you another drop down point to maybe try to drop down and just catch them off guard, because they might have been expecting you to drop down on the other side of the building with the opening that's already there that didn't have a breakable wall in it. So again, with this top floor, don't break out the backside breakable wall, and if you want to maybe catch the survivors off guard or give yourself a couple more options, then you're okay to break out the breakable wall that looks out over these 2 tiles. Alright, let's go check out some more Macmillan maps. Alright, so the second map on our list is Groaning Storehouse. And this map's going to be kind of easy to showcase because there is only a single breakable wall in this entire map. So let's go find it real quick, and then I'll give you the 411 on what I think about it. So it's right here, and you always want to kick it out. It's just that simple. Now, the reason you want to always kick it out is because there, again, window, breakable wall. So by kicking out this breakable wall, we turn this incredibly strong window in the main building that a survivor can vault through, get to a tile here, get to a tile there, and do a lot of damage with, into a relatively simple loop where you can just walk around and already be in position to try to get a hit on them. And if they double back, they can only go through the window 3 times before they're just blocked off, and then you have an easy short chase. Alright, so Ironworks of Misery is going to be our third Macmillan map that we're going to look at. And I'm actually really glad we got this spawn, because if I spawned into this and this was a real game, the very first thing I would do is kick out this wall without missing a beat. I'm not going to do it right away just now because I want to explain a couple things first, but similar to Groaning Storehouse, there are some walls that I would classify as pre-kick, where like if you spawn like directly in front of it or even like close to it, you do want to take a sec at the beginning of the match, that first 5 seconds, and kick out that breakable wall, because it's going to make your life a lot easier when the survivors start trying to loop you at this tile. Now this top breakable wall, again, we're going to look at our assumption of there's a wall directly next to a window. If they vault through this window, if you have to vault after them, they're going to get a ton of distance and be way far away by the time you actually get to start chasing them again. So breaking out this breakable wall is going to make this loop shorter, and it's going to help you out a lot. The other place that this breakable wall can spawn is in this doorway, and then instead of this window being open, this window will be open instead. If that's the case, it's still the exact same. You've got your breakable wall here and your window here. Again, you do want to break out this breakable wall in order to make sure that this part of the tile goes from incredibly safe to basically a free hit. Because if a survivor goes to vault here and you just go around, you should be able to lunge and get a quick hit there as they come through the window. Now, the only other breakable wall on Ironworks of Misery is actually going to be down at the bottom of the stairs. Now this one, even though I'm breaking it out right now, you do not want to break this wall out ever. Because if a survivor's coming down the stairs here, instead of having to go outwards to these tiles and try to find some safety, instead they can go right back up the stairs and keep looping you in this area. And for some killers, like for Nurse, if you have trouble landing your blinks, or even some of the 4.4 movement speed killers like Huntress or Hag, if you're having a little bit of trouble catching up to the survivor, they could waste a lot more of your time with this loop if you break out the wall than if you don't. And so for that reason, I would say on this map, you want to always break out the top wall, and you never want to break out the bottom wall. So last but not least, we have Suffocation Pit. And again, like all the rest of the Macmillan maps, with the exception of Shelter Woods, because it doesn't have a main building, all of the breakable walls are going to be located here. Now, this variation only has one breakable wall, and it's right in this main side, but there are some variations that have ones next to the window. Like, this window could be open and there will be a breakable wall right here, or this window will be open and there will be a breakable wall here and no path out to this side. There's a couple variations on this map. I would argue that you should break out every single breakable wall in this building. The ones next to the window, it makes this loop a lot less safe, and the ones that are next to these doorways, when they do spawn over here, if you break them out, it's going to make the tile as a whole a lot less safe for the survivor. So for Suffocation Pit, I would recommend breaking out all of the breakable walls, which there should only be one or two, but you should break out all of them every single time when you spawn into this map. So Azarov's resting place is the first of the Autohaven Wreckers maps that we're going to take a look at here. And this map is really similar to Groaning Storehouse because there's only ever one breakable wall in the entire map, and it's right next to a window, and if we kick it out, the loop gets shorter, gets weaker for the survivors. So just like Groaning Storehouse, if we spawn in right next to it like we just did, the very first thing of the match that I would do personally is always kick out this wall, because then later on when the survivors get here, they're going to have a much harder time either mind gaming this window or trying to loot me at this building. Now it's important to note that the breakable wall can spawn either in the front door here or in the back door, and the window can spawn on either side as well. That's not really relevant. Regardless of where the window breakable wall combo spawns, you are always going to want to kick out this wall. So Blood Lodge is similar to Azarov's resting place because there's only going to be one breakable wall, and it's a pre-kick wall. Again, what I mean by pre-kick wall is if you spawn, even where I spawned right there, if you're going this way to search for survivors, you do want to take a sec and just break down the wall immediately. Now if we look at this, again, by breaking down this breakable wall, we can turn a perfectly safe window into maybe not a completely unsafe window, but it's definitely going to make the survivor's job of getting away from us a lot harder. Gas Heaven is the next map we're going to take a look at, and we got to go back to the main building again, but there's more than one breakable wall that we need to take a look at this time. There's actually going to be 3, and one of them we always want to break out, and 2 of them we don't ever want to break out. So this one that's in the back door, it can sometimes spawn in the back door, and it can sometimes spawn in the front door, but regardless, it'll always have a window next to it. For the back door, the window spawns here, and for the front door, this window will be unblocked here. Regardless of which one or which spawn you get, you do always want to break out this wall. If I was going to try to chase a survivor here and vault through this window every single time instead of breaking out this wall, the combination of the pallet spawn here and the pallet spawn here would make my life a living hell as I tried to catch them. I wouldn't be able to do it. On the other hand, you never ever want to kick out either of these 2 walls because there's only one pallet here, and once that pallet gets removed, if a survivor runs into this room, like, look at this, it's a tiny room, they're trapped. And so if you get rid of that one pallet, all of a sudden, any survivor that goes in here is either going to get hit or downed. Last but certainly not least of the Autohaven Wreckers map set is the Wretched Shop. And this one's a little bit tricky because the breakable wall always spawns in the same place, but that's not the deciding factor on whether or not you want to kick it out. So this building only has one breakable wall in it, but it also only ever has one window, and it can spawn in here, or it can spawn where these boards are over on this side. When the window spawns here, kicking out this wall is an absolute must if you want to turn this loop into one that you can actually play and catch a survivor at. So if the window spawns on what'll be the left side, if you're looking at this car, right? If it spawns over here to our left, you must absolutely kick out this wall. If the window spawns on the right, over on this side, do not kick out the wall, because this will be just an empty blank room with 3 walls, and if a survivor runs over here, they'll only be trapping themselves. So again, the window spawn is the deciding factor on whether or not you need to break out the wall on Wretched Shop. Coming right along to our next set of maps we're going to look at, we are going to take a sec to look at the breakable walls on the Crotus Pren Asylum maps. Now, just like both Autohaven Wreckers and Macmillan Estate, all the breakable walls will be found in this main building. Now, the first one that we want to look at is going to be right next to this window in sort of this greenhouse looking area, right? There's always a window here. Now, the hatch is going to annoy me, so I'm going to move away for a sec. But there's going to be a window right there and a breakable wall on that side. Breaking out this breakable wall again turns this safe window into a much less safe window, because if a survivor's going here and you can see that, you're already here, and there's even a ramp that leads you right to the window for you to try to get a quick hit on the survivor. Now, the only other place that a breakable wall can spawn is going to be over on this side of the map. It can sometimes spawn in one of these gaps on this side. It looks like we didn't get it this time, but if you get a breakable wall that spawns there, you do also want to kick out that breakable wall. Alright, so the other asylum map is Father Campbell's Chapel. Once again, we do have to make our way back towards the main building. And again, there's only going to be one, maybe two breakable walls. Just like Disturbed Ward, these are basically pre-break walls. Like this one, again, you got your wall, you got your window. So we just want to take this wall and knock it down as quickly as possible. Alright, so Badham Preschool is a little bit more complicated than some of the maps we've been looking at up until this point. There are 3 buildings that have breakable walls in them, and we're just going to take a look at them one at a time. The first one we're going to stop and take a look at is this 2-story house. It can spawn in a couple different locations, but you're going to have 2 breakable walls, one on either side. Now, a window might spawn just like so. It might spawn like in one of the corners over here, but there will always be one breakable wall that has a window next to it and one that doesn't. The one that has the window next to it, if you think back all the way to the beginning of this video, right? We want to kick out because it makes the window a lot weaker. It's going to shorten up that loop, and it's going to make your life easier. On the other hand, the one that has no window next to it, we do not want to kick out, because opening up this wall right here is actually going to help the survivors by giving them more options, and especially with this house, which has a bunch of windows and places survivors can run and hide and drop pallets at, we really don't want to give them any more options than we absolutely have to. The next building we're going to move to is the main building, the preschool. And just like the 2-story house, there are 2 breakable walls in the preschool. They're going to be located at either end. If we go into the central area, we can see one down there and one down there. But we don't ever want to kick out these breakable walls. Ideally, basement will spawn either here or on this side sometimes, which on this version we weren't lucky enough to get. But if basement spawns and you down a survivor, you should always hook them in the basement in the bottom of this building instead of trying to take them outside. Now, if you do get a variation like this that does not have basement in the building, this is the one exception to the rule. If I am chasing a survivor down here, and let's say I down them like, oh, I don't know, about here-ish, right? There's no hook for me to take them to. And if I try to not break out this wall and just walk all the way through all of this area, they are going to struggle out before I can make it to a hook, right? So instead of letting them struggle out, what you want to do is you want to pick one side. Don't do both, but you want to pick one side and break out that side, and then pick them up and carry them to a hook. If you break out both sides, you're going to create an incredibly long and complex loop, which skilled survivors can run you at for a very long time. So again, with this building, you got to be careful, but if you don't have a basement, you'll have to kick out just one on one side. This building, which is referred to as House of Pain, can have a breakable wall that spawns here, or a breakable wall that spawns in the back over here, or a breakable wall that spawns here. Now, if the breakable wall spawns either where it's located currently with no window going to the stairwell, you don't have to kick it out. So if it spawns here and there's no window nearby, don't kick it out. If it spawns at this back door, it will have a window near it, and you have to kick out the back door. So kick out the back door, don't kick out the side door. And if it's in the middle, right here, I would actually argue that you don't want to kick this out. Because if I go down into this basement, right, they have one pallet that they can work with, they being the survivor team. But the survivor team has one pallet to work with, and then they have to go back up out the other side, or else they're essentially running right where you are. But instead, if I kick out this breakable wall, or as you can see here, it gives a lot more options. Again, they can go outside, they can go back down into the basement and try to make another loop. They can, double back and try to hide in one of these lockers. So in the interest of cutting down the number of options a survivor team has, you also don't want to kick out the middle door when you're trying to catch survivors in the House of Pain. So that's all of the breakable wall spawns that can show up on Badham Preschool. And the rest of the maps we're going to look at are like Badham in that instead of it being a set like Autohaven Wreckers or the Macmillan Estate where there's a bunch that are all sort of the same theme, the rest of the maps that we're going to look at are all one-offs where there's only one of each type and there's a couple different variations on where the breakable walls can spawn. And so these segments might take just a touch longer, but we should be able to just rip right through them as long as I keep talking at a relatively quick pace. So let's keep on moving as we go on to the next one. Alright, so next on our list of maps we have the Gideon Meat Plant, and there are a bunch of breakable walls on this map, but really my advice is going to be the same for every single one of them, in that you should never ever have to break a wall on the Gideon Meat Plant. Now, the reason that you don't ever want to break any of these walls, as soon as I find one to illustrate my point, is because you are going to be taking a sealed square room that might have like a pallet and a singular drop down point and opening it up. So if we take this room, for example, right? There's two doors, two big doors, one pallet, and a drop down. If they go through either the big doors or the drop down, you're going to be able to just see exactly where the survivor went and follow right behind them. They do have this pallet here, but once they use that, this is essentially a dead tile. If the generator pops, this big metal door will open, and then you don't need to go through the breakable wall because you'll already have access to this room now because of the door opening after the generator is completed. But if the generator hasn't been completed, then if I open up this breakable wall, I've now effectively doubled the size of this tile because I've doubled the number of pallets available and I've doubled the number of drop-down spots available. So for every single one of these breakable walls in the Gideon Meat Plant, you do not want to break out the wall because it's only going to make your life harder. Alright, now unlike Sanctum of Wrath, Family Residence has a couple breakable walls over in its main building. Hatch is right over there, but that's not what we're going to focus on right now. Alright, so there's a couple breakable walls that can spawn in different places on this map. And the first one that we're going to take a look at is this one over here on this corner. Now, there's no window here, again, and just going off those underlying guidelines, since there's no window, we do not have to break this breakable wall. We don't even have to break this breakable wall. Even though there's a gap here, because it's just a doorway and not a window, we can just chase a survivor right through here. And they can get a vault here, but there's not anything we can really do about that, and breaking either of these breakable walls doesn't really help us do that. There's a third breakable wall that's going to be over on this side, and as we can see, it's a lot closer to a window, so we are going to want to break out that wall. Just as a reminder, again, that all of these walls on the exterior of this building, because there's a handful of different combinations that can show up, but the ones in the exterior wall that don't have windows next to them, you do not need to kick out, but ones like the one on this corner over here that do have a window next to them like that, you do need to kick out. Now, sometimes the wall that this window is in has a blocked door, like here or maybe on the other side, depending on which way the wall is facing. And that is the only one that I would describe as a pre-kick breakable wall for this map. So I don't remember, to my credit before, or to not my credit, but to my detriment, if Ormond had breakable walls in the main chateau before the rework, but it definitely does now. Which is why we're here to talk about them. So first, this one on the bottom floor, it can either spawn in this doorway, or it can spawn over on this side. And if it's on this doorway, you have to break it out, but I would still recommend kicking out this one as well, on the off chance that it helps you play this window, because, again, just shortening up the amount of time it takes to get to a survivor that's climbed through that window is really going to help you out. The rest of the breakable walls are up here on the second floor, and you do not need to break out any of these breakable walls. If we look here, breaking out these breakable walls really just gives the survivor more options and can help them set up loops. And then if we come in here, if we kick out this breakable wall, we're just opening up a whole nother room that would be almost entirely closed off. If a survivor runs down here and runs into this room and hops out this window, don't kick out a wall. It's not worth taking the time to kick out the wall here and then drop down it's better to just hop out the window after them. Because unless the survivor has balance landing, they're not going to make a ton of distance, and instead you're actually going to be able to get a quick hit on them. This other breakable wall, I guess I forgot about one on the first floor, but you don't need to kick out this wall either because you can just hold W and walk around it. It's just more of a time waster wall than anything else. But yeah, so the first floor, you only need to kick out the one by the bar, and then on the second floor, you do not need to kick out any of these breakable walls here. Just climb right out the window, and you're hot on the survivor's heels again. Alright, now these last two maps are some of the ones that have the most breakable walls, because as they've made more and more maps, they've incorporated breakable walls. The Dead by Daylight developers' behavior have incorporated more and more breakable walls into their maps. So we're going to start with this first one. I call this area Reception. I think I've heard other people call it that too. It's not like a term that I made up. But in order to make sure that this vault is a lot weaker, you do need to break out this breakable wall. I would even classify this as a pre-kick wall. Moving along, we're going to go to this bathroom, and these walls are a little bit tricky. You can kick out either both the top and the bottom walls, or just the bottom, because if we kick out just the bottom wall, this pathway actually becomes a dead end, and you can get an easy hit on a survivor because they'll be trapped, or if you're playing someone like Bubba or Hillbilly, anyone with an insta-down, you can just get a free down on a survivor here. If you do break out both these walls, that's not the end of the world, just because it gives you another way to get between floors easily, and there are 4 pathways between each floor, one on each corner of the map, and so opening this one up gives you the ability to just have a little bit more access to the upper floor and gives you a little bit more mobility. Now some of these classrooms are also going to have breakable walls in the doorways, and the reason for that is that there's actually a window here, right? And so each time you have a breakable wall next to a window in this manner, you do need to break these out. Because otherwise a survivor can vault. Let's say you're chasing them through this classroom and they vault this window, you have to come around and then you have to stop and break it just to get in. And once you do, they could actually just climb right back out and then run back the way they came. I would classify all of both the reception wall as well as all of the walls that are along the edges of these classrooms as pre-kick. And whenever I play this map, I usually just stop as I'm going if I'm not actively in a chase, and I'll just kick them just to get them out of the way. There's only a handful of classrooms that have that, but it is still important to make sure that you open them up just to give yourself more mobility. There's 2 walls in this corner, one at the top, which I would recommend breaking, and one at the bottom, which I would also recommend breaking. This is again just to improve the overall mobility of your killer, to make sure that they can get between floors easily and find survivors in an efficient manner. The only breakable wall on Midwich that you do not need to kick whatsoever is going to be out in this middle tile out here. So if you come out here and you come to this one, there's no reason to kick out this breakable wall because it's actually going to give the survivors a better angle to get a fast vault through this window, and it'll actually help them. So other than that, every single breakable wall in Midwich can go. And honestly should go. Alright, so we're starting out here in the Saloon, of which the map is named, and this is actually a great place to start because it has the most breakable walls in this map, and this map as a whole, if I've counted correctly, has the most breakable walls out of them all. So there's 3 pre-kick walls on this main building. We've got one right here on the ground floor, and again, this is just because it's right next to this window. We want to make these windows as weak as possible for the survivor team. The second one is up here at the top. We also want to make sure we break this down as quickly as possible. And then this third and final pre-kick wall that you want to just maybe even start the game off by destroying is right up here. And all 3 of these have strong windows next to them, and just by making sure to kick out these walls, it's going to make your life a lot easier. Now, this wall down here on the bottom floor, you do not need to kick out. The amount of time it takes to kick out that wall is not worth it. It's much better to just chase survivors and down them efficiently. Now, if we climb into this room right here, we have our remaining 3 breakable walls. We have 1, 2, 3. And you don't want to break these breakable walls unless a survivor goes down in this room, just because you need a way to carry them to a hook. If that happens, you want to make sure you break out this breakable wall and not either of the other 2. Because if you break out either this breakable wall or this breakable wall, you're actually going to create longer loops in the Saloon instead of making a short loop that they can vault this window, but then you're right here and it doesn't really matter if they go in or out. Additionally, if the survivor does go down here and you break out this wall, you should have like a hook here, maybe a hook there. There's hooks close by, and so by just picking them up real quick, it's going to take you the least amount of time to get to one of these close hooks as opposed to going to one of the hooks that's farther. So next up, we're going to look at some of these tiles. This is a modified T and L wall, and even though this side of the T wall is much longer, this side of the T wall is much shorter. And so unless you absolutely need to, you do not need to kick out this wall. And I know that sounds kind of like an oxymoron or a contradiction, but just try to play this normally, like walk around, maybe mind game on this side. But if you really can't catch the survivor, maybe they're a little more experienced than you, or you're having a hard time, that is when I would recommend kicking out this wall that's in the middle of the T. There's usually one other tile that also happens to have a breakable wall in it. In this case, it's going to be at this end, in like a little tight dead end. You don't need to break out this breakable wall because the survivor that runs here will actually catch themselves. There is sometimes a cul-de-sac, and I'm going to cut that footage in here, where when you're running to it, there's a breakable wall to the right, and you would have to either vault through it or walk around to the left in order to catch the survivor. You just want to break that one out immediately, because if you don't, the survivor will have plenty of time to get to a pallet or another tile entirely. Now this little structure here, you don't need to kick this one out either. Similar to that one that's on the first floor of the saloon, this is another time waster wall, where the amount of time it takes to break this out gives the survivor time to get away, where you could just try to mind game this to get a hit on them. If you can mind game a tile for an M1 attack, you do not need to break out those walls. And then the final wall that we need to take a look at is the wall in Killer Shack here. You don't need to break out this wall, but I like to. And what I mean by this is you can just play this Killer Shack the same way that you play every Killer Shack, where, you know, you can mind game it a little, you can make sure you chase the survivor the right way, you can mind game this window, all that good stuff. But if we do break out this wall, it gives you two benefits. The first is that it makes it easier to mind game this window in terms of hiding your red light and like backing around the corner, right, for some easy moonwalks. And then the other thing is if a survivor comes through this door, they're going to be set up for a fast vault through this window, right? Where they're just going to run, get that fast vault, keep on trucking. But sometimes they might cut this, like the survivor might cut the corner just a little bit too close here, and when they do that, if they're not paying attention, they'll actually wind up with a medium vault on this window, and you can get an M1 attack there as well. So I believe that is all of the breakable walls for Dead Dog's Saloon, and with that, we have successfully completed a look at every single breakable wall in Dead by Daylight. If you guys made it all the way to the end of the video, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to check out my guide. If you like this kind of content and you would prefer to see more guides and sort of gameplay tips in the future, be sure to let me know. I would greatly appreciate just, leaving a like or leaving a comment. And if you want to catch all of my future work, be sure to go ahead and subscribe as well. So yeah, thanks again so much for watching, and I'll be sure to see you guys in the next video.